manipulate games to be famous.
If you were searching for the face of chaos in the NBA, you'd probably find Dennis Rodman grinning back at you, daring you to take him seriously, while he quietly prepared to uproot everything you thought you knew about basketball. Rodman wasn't just a player, or even just an agitator. He was the embodiment of
He just wants it a little bit more than everybody else right now.
all the rules that shouldn't work, and somehow did. For more than a decade, teams across the league would spend sleepless nights trying to plan for him. Broadcasters scrambled to find new words for his antics, and opposing superstars eventually just surrendered to the fact there was nothing ordinary or predictable about the man known as the Worm. It was more than his painted hair, tattoo sleeves, or the larger-than-life off-court persona. It was the way he turned rebounding and defending, two jobs no one wanted, into the most dangerous weapons the game had ever seen. Most NBA legends are defined by how many points they score or titles they win. Rodman, he made his mark with the moments you never saw on the highlight reel, knocking giants off their axis, diving beyond the sidelines, sacrificing his body for balls nobody else even bothered to chase. If you want to understand why Dennis Rodman was the NBA's most dangerous defender, you have to look deeper, past the bravado and wild nights, to the mind beneath the madness. Let's start with what made him physically unique. Kevin Garnett, one of the best defenders of his own era, doesn't hesitate when asked if Rodman would dominate today's NBA. He goes straight for what set Dennis apart, his insane agility, coupled with a relentless hunger for contact. At 6'9", Rodman could do things with his body that big men just aren't built to do. He'd move his feet with guards, switch onto almost any position, and stay right in front of the quickest scorers. If you wanted to keep him off the boards, you had to meet his level of physicality or get out of the way. Most couldn't do either. There's a story about Rodman pulling down 49 rebounds in a game. Numbers so astronomical they almost sound made up. But it happened because Rodman simply outworked and outthought everyone on the court. But here's where the legend starts to separate from the rest: the genius. Isaiah Thomas, Hall of Fame point guard and one of Rodman's earliest NBA teammates, remembers him as a straight-up basketball genius. In the 80s and 90s, nobody paid big money for defense or rebounding. If you weren't scoring, you weren't likely to find yourself on magazine covers or making all-star appearances. But Rodman, he flipped the script. He made the league and fans care about the ugly work, the blue-collar hustle no one wanted to be responsible for. He did it so well, in fact, that he turned rebounding and defense into almost glamorous acts. And he got paid. Big, just for doing what nobody else wanted to do. It wasn't just effort either. Rodman treated rebounding like a science experiment. In warm-ups, while everyone else practiced layups and jumpers, he'd stand off to the side, watching every shooter, studying every wrist flick, memorizing how the ball spun for each player. If someone released the ball with backspin, Rodman already knew where the miss would end up, short or long, left or right. He'd whisper small notes to himself. This guy spins it 3 times, that guy with 2. Every shot, every player, Rodman mapped it out like a chess master predicting moves 8 turns in advance. So when the game started and a rebound came flying off the rim, it just looked like luck to casual fans. In reality, Rodman had already calculated exactly where the ball would bounce. He never seemed to get boxed out, never got caught late. And if it was a battle for position, he'd use every trick in the book. His hips, his arms, sheer determination, sometimes even his head, both figuratively and literally. He once dove headfirst into a row of photographers, just to wrestle a loose ball away from players twice his size. For the stars that went up against him, Rodman quickly became a puzzle that couldn't be solved. Dirk Nowitzki, the German superstar who idolized the Bulls during his teenage years, got to experience the Rodman dilemma up close when the Mavericks signed Dennis late in his career. By then, Rodman's methods went from quirky to downright legendary. Dirk and his teammates would finish suiting up for meetings, ready to hear the final instructions and defensive assignments. Right when the coaches started talking, Rodman would stand up and just walk off to take a shower. Film sessions, huddles, game plans, they barely crossed his mind. He'd miss all the X's and O's, do his own thing, and somehow still go out there and leave his mark. After games, while everyone cooled down and celebrated or sulked, Rodman would just disappear to the weight room, crush a brutal post-game workout. Did it work in Dallas? Not really. But even that experience, however chaotic or short-lived, caught everyone's attention. Every night became an event when Rodman was in town. He made arenas sell out, turned every game into a spectacle, and left teammates shaking their heads, wondering how someone so unpredictable could still be so reliable when the real battle started. The secret, according to teammates, was simple. Rodman wanted it more than anybody else. He once told a young John Sally that rebounding was about hunger. "See all those big guys?" he'd ask. "They're all bigger than me, but they don't want it like I do." Rodman promised to pass Sally the ball every time he got a rebound, and he kept his word. He rarely shot after grabbing offensive boards, always looking to give his teammates easy dunks or layups. On paper, that humility showed up as stat lines you'd never see from superstars. 0 points, 18 rebounds, or 40 boards across 2 games, but barely scoring. He didn't play for highlights. He played for wins and for the quiet satisfaction of making life hell for the other team. The rest of his routines were just as unconventional. Rodman baffled coaches and teammates alike, but those closest to him recognized a logic within his chaos. David Robinson, who played alongside the Worm on the Spurs, eventually learned to love the madman next to him. Robinson called Rodman Superman because he just never seemed to get tired, running from tip-off to final buzzer like he was powered by some hidden engine. Robinson knew he always had a warrior with him. Even if off the court, Rodman did things a little differently. In the locker room, he was a loner. On the court, he was irreplaceable. Michael Jordan, the greatest competitor the game has ever seen, tells a story that probably says it best. During Bulls practices, Coach Phil Jackson would subject the players to brutal endurance drills. Jordan's group always tried to pace themselves, finding ways to coast and conserve. The second Rodman jumped to the front, though, he didn't jog. He sprinted, cranking up the tempo so high it took the rest of the team 4 laps just to catch him. To Dennis, everything on the court was a test of stamina, of will, of whether anyone could possibly outlast him. The answer was almost always no. But that spirit didn't turn off when he left the gym. Shaquille O'Neal, one of the biggest NBA personalities of all time, still marvels at Rodman's routine, or lack of one. While most pros stuck to a strict schedule, Rodman did things his way. Sometimes he'd roll in less than an hour before the game, still eating chicken and rice, ignoring meetings and strategy sessions. Then he'd go out, pull down 20 or 25 rebounds, and afterward, instead of celebrating or sulking, he'd put in another workout or vanish into the night, always finding new ways to shock, entertain, or confuse those around him. On nights off, his legend only grew larger. Fellow party kings like Reggie Miller remember standing inside Chicago clubs, watching Rodman seemingly command entire bars, pulling stunts and convincing crowds to follow his every move. Surrounded by models, police officers, musicians, and fans, Rodman would act like nothing fazed him, leading group shots and wild after parties. But within hours, he'd be back on the court, ready to chase down the league's toughest rebounders and hand-check the biggest stars. It's easy to think the wild child image was all there was. But beneath the tattoos and piercings, Dennis Rodman was, secretly, one of basketball's most intelligent players. His IQ was unshakable. He made reads that other players couldn't even see. Teammates like Steve Kerr sing his praises for exactly that, saying most people couldn't understand how someone so eccentric, so unconventional, could make such perfect defensive rotations, anticipate plays, tip balls to keep possessions alive, and break down the best scorers in the league. Rodman never needed to score. He transformed the sport by making hustle and defense as valuable as a game-winning shot. He'd spark a game with a tip, an extra rebound, a deflection, or just by drawing charges that took opposing stars out of their rhythm. Coaches were forced to build special scouting reports just for him. But coaches adapted, trusting that the results mattered more than the journey. Phil Jackson, perhaps the only coach who ever truly understood Rodman, once sent teammates to Atlantic City with him in hopes of keeping him connected. So Steve Kerr and Judd Buechler went along for one epic night of gambling and no sleep, watching Rodman on his own turf, then limped through practice in the morning, while Rodman somehow remained unfazed. The lesson? With Dennis, you had to play by his rules because nowhere else did the old rules apply. And then there's maybe the best evidence of Rodman's impact, the words of NBA legend Shawn Kemp. In the 1996 NBA Finals, facing a Bulls team driven by Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, Kemp expected to tangle with the usual offensive dagger. Instead, he found himself flustered, frustrated, and ultimately defeated by Dennis Rodman. Game after game, the moment Seattle needed a big rebound, Rodman materialized. He'd fly into crowds, wink at the bench, and launch psychological warfare on his defenders, colorful contacts, lip gloss, anything to throw an opponent off just enough to steal an important rebound or cause hesitation on a box out. One of his favorite targets was Frank Brickowski. Rodman played mind games so well that even the steeliest opponents grew rattled, playing below their standards, letting frustration snowball into mistakes. Every detail, every antic was calculated. Rodman never stopped adjusting. He did what needed to be done, no matter how strange it looked from the stands. That's what made him the most dangerous defender the game ever saw. Not just the rebounding and hustle, but this otherworldly ability to control the rhythm of the game, to set traps nobody else saw coming, to turn chaos into a tool for winning. He isn't remembered for thunderous dunks or mind-blowing scoring streaks. He didn't dominate with isolation highlights. He carved out his place as the master of chaos, the manipulator of momentum, the player who could turn any game on its head by out-hustling and outthinking everyone else, all while living life on his own terms. When you talk about NBA legends, about what sets them apart, what made them a threat, sometimes it's about points, records, or MVP trophies. But Dennis Rodman's legacy is different. He forced the league to reckon with the idea that you can break every rule, live outside every convention, and still win. Sometimes because of, not in spite of, your wildest ideas. Maybe you see the crazy hair and wild parties first, but ask anyone who's truly been in the grind, and they'll tell you it was the relentless will, the insatiable hunger for victory, and the unmatched mind games that made Dennis Rodman not just a Hall of Famer, but the most dangerous defender basketball has ever known. That's why even the greatest scorers, the biggest bruisers, and the most accomplished champions list his name first when they talk about the players that truly left them scrambling for answers. So when you tell the story of Dennis Rodman, don't stop at the costumes or the controversies. Picture a man sacrificing his body for the smallest of chances, planning every box out 4 moves ahead, and leaping for balls everyone else gave up on. He transformed the role of defender and rebounder into something heroic, something mythic, something that, without a single three-pointer or highlight reel dunk, could bring the biggest egos in basketball crashing down to earth. That's the real legend of Dennis Rodman, the chaos he created, the lessons he taught, and the proof that sometimes winning starts by playing a different game than anyone else on the floor.